Welcome to Sleep Tight Frights, the place where bedtime stories don't always end sweetly. I'm Evergrey, your storyteller in the shadows. Each tale is a little strange, a little spooky, and just creepy enough to keep you peeking over the covers. So settle in, close your eyes, but don't fall asleep just yet. Welcome to Sleep Tight Frights. Some towns whisper warnings, some families pass them down, and sometimes those warnings are more than old stories. In the town of Dryridge, the wind never rests. It scratches windows. It steals voices, and at night it listens. Tonight's story is about a girl who thought she was braver than the breeze until she learned what rides the wind. This is The Witch Who Lives in the Wind. The town of Dryridge was always windy, not the fun kind either. No breezes for flying kites or spinning pinwheels. Dryridge wind was sharp. It slapped shutters, knocked over bins, and scratched the windows like long, dry nails. It carried dust across the streets, lifted grit into children's eyes, and sometimes tore laundry right off the lines. The people of Dryridge grew used to holding their hats, to leaning into invisible hands when they walked. But they never grew used to the sound. The wind didn't howl like a wolf, it hissed, it whispered, it muttered at the edge of hearing, as if speaking words that refused to be understood. And everyone who lived there knew one thing: never whistle after sunset. Jessa had heard the warning her whole life. Moosham told it best, her grandfather, with a voice like gravel and thunder. "That wind don't blow empty," he'd say. "It carries her, and she listens for whistling. If she hears you, she'll call back, and you'll have to answer." Then he'd cross himself, spit in the dust, and change the subject. When she was little, Jessa used to picture her, a woman made of storm, tall and tattered like scarecrows in the fall fields, a figure caught between cloud and crow. The idea thrilled her in a way she would never admit. But now that she was 12, she didn't really believe. Not in witches, not in curses, not in rules made to scare children. And though no whistling rule, it felt silly. She could whistle if she wanted. One night, just after the sun dipped low, Jessa stood on the back porch. The air was restless, pulling at her hair, tugging her sleeves like an impatient hand. She puckered her lips, drew in a breath, and whistled. One note, clear, high, and quick. The wind stopped, just for a second, and the stillness was so sudden, so total, that her heart thudded like a drum in her chest. And then came an answer, a second whistle, lower, farther, but coming closer. Jessa's stomach dropped. She backed inside, locked the door, and pressed her back against it, waiting for her own laughter to come. But it didn't. The wind didn't sound the same anymore. It wasn't wild, it was watching. It didn't blow, it crept. That night her dreams were full of dust and feathers and long, pale hands scratching at her windows. She woke with a start. Every pane of glass was streaked with spirals from the inside. The next day, Jessa didn't mention the whistle. Not at school, not to her mom, but the air outside had changed. The weather moved wrong. Clouds stacked faster than they should. The light shifted like a lamp, turned too high, then turned too low. Every flag in the town flapped towards her, no matter which way she walked. That afternoon, a storm rolled in. Fast, mean. The clouds didn't crawl, they ran. The power flickered, the air grew heavy, and the winds whispered her name. Not shouted, not screamed, whispered, right outside the door. Jessa. That night, she found dirt in her shoes, feather under her pillow. Her cat refused to sleep in the room. It sat out in the doorway, hackles raised, staring at the window with wide green eyes. And in the corner of her mirror, a figure, tall, faint, wrapped in cloth and storm clouds, so faint it might have been a smudge or a trick of her tired eyes. But when Jessa turned, no one stood there. The wind called again, closer. Jessa. She tried to sleep with earplugs in. It didn't help. The whispers slid through the walls, slipped under the doors, crawled into her ears. And something scraped at her window. A finger, a branch, something else. She didn't look. She didn't breathe. She just whispered into the dark, "I'm sorry." And the wind replied, too late. The next day, kids at school started acting strange. They said hi to her twice, as if they weren't sure it was her the first time. They stared longer than they should, blinking hard, as if her face kept changing when they looked away. Her teacher's chalk broke when he said her name, and when she got home, a feather was nailed to her door, long, gray, dusted, still twitching in the wind. That evening, her grandpa pulled her aside, held her by her shoulders, looked straight into her eyes, his old ones glassy with fear. "What did you do?" Her throat closed, she started to cry, and told him everything. He didn't yell, he just lit a braid of sweetgrass, burned cedar, smudged the smoke around her head. Then he took off his own hat, placed it in her hands. "You follow the wind now," he said. "Don't fight it, don't run, you face her or she'll never stop." So Jessa did. That night she stepped outside. The wind howled, tore at her sleeves, it pulled her hair like claws. It filled her mouth with dust until her teeth crunched, but she walked into it, past the old orchard where branches clacked like bones, through the gully that used to hold rain, now dry and cracked as broken pottery, and into the open field behind the ridge, where the dust rose like smoke. The witch waited. She didn't look like a cartoon, no green skin, no broom. She was taller than trees, wrapped in coats of wind and feather, a tattered cloak that moved as if alive. Her eyes were hidden, buried behind a drift of hair like shredded cloth. Each strand twitched and hissed as if alive, each one whispering secrets Jessa could almost hear. And then the witch raised her hand. The wind stopped, dead silence. Even Jessa's breath felt too loud. "You called," said the witch, her voice both close and far, a whisper that filled the field. Jessa nodded, too scared to lie. "Then you must trade," said the witch. "A voice for a voice, a name for a name, a fear for a fear." Jessa's lips trembled. I don't understand." But the witch bent low, closer than a shadow. She touched Jessa's chest, right where her heart beat loudest, and whispered, "What are you most afraid of?" It wasn't the dark or the witch, it was losing someone. Grandpa, Mom, friends. Being alone, forgotten. Jessa whispered, "That." The wind took it, not the fear itself, but the weight of it, the heaviness in her chest, the dread that sometimes kept her awake at night, and in its place, silence. Real silence. She hadn't heard true stillness in years, not until then. The witch blinked, turned, and blew away like sand. Jessa walked home at dawn, the sky pink, the town still, the wind gentle for once, waiting. She never whistled again, but sometimes, when a storm rolls in too fast and the shutters rattle and the clouds sprint across the hills, she hears a voice on the edge of the breeze calling her name, and she remembers the trade. You've been listening to Sleep Tight Frights. If you ever hear your name whispered in the wind, remember this: not every call deserves an answer, and whatever you do, never whistle after sunset. The truth is, Jessa's town isn't the only place with rules about the wind. Warnings like hers drift across the world, carried on old stories and even older fears. People everywhere have looked out at the restless sky, heard something move through the air, and wondered, was that the breeze, or something hidden inside? Which brings us to tonight's fear fact. Stay tuned. The idea of witches, spirits, or monsters that ride on the wind has haunted human imagination for centuries. In Scotland, storm hags were said to whip across the moors, hiding inside whirlwinds. If one stopped at your window, you could lose more than sleep. Here in Canada, prairie families spoke of spirits who lived in the wind itself. They said the gusts scratched at windows with long invisible claws, waiting for someone foolish enough to whistle back. And even today, there are reports of voices carried by storms, whispers that seem to know your name. Maybe it's just the howl of air moving through cracks and branches, or maybe the wind is never empty. Maybe it always carries someone waiting for an answer. Thank you for listening to Sleep Tight Frights. It means more than you know, to us and to the things that listen back. I'm Ever Gray, your guide through the shadows, and if you felt something was watching as the story unfolded, you're not alone. They remember the ones who listen, they wait for the ones who return. So come back soon. Sleep tight if you can.